Hi, everyone. I'm happy that you're joining last live, hopefully. And if not, then I'm happy that you're watching this replay. And warmest welcome to you. And thank you for finding time to join us for this conversation. This is Genius Leadership Podcast Live. We're streaming on LinkedIn and YouTube, and then it will go on all the platforms where our show is later on. And today I'm super excited for the topic and because it will be a maybe tricky one for some people, but I hope it will give you a lot of value because we're going to talk about introverts in leadership positions and as entrepreneurs. I'm sure that a lot of us will relate to some parts that we're going to discuss with my guest today, and let's just roll that and see what the discussion brings to me, to Tad, and to all of you. So I am having Tad Lusk with me today. He is the therapist. He's also a musician, and helping introverted entrepreneurs, and super passionate about that at the moment because he came from that himself. So let's uncover this topic of introversion together today, Tad. And welcome to the show.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to connect with people. It's just the blessing of this situation with COVID that more people got more fine with connecting online because otherwise I wouldn't be able to get so many amazing guests as I'm getting nowadays.
Yeah.
So Tad, sorry, go.
Oh, I was just gonna say that is really interesting how that has happened. It's been really cool.
Yeah. It's blessing in disguise, and we just need to choose to see the positive parts of that.
I agree.
So I usually start with the definition, just that we're on the same page, or I understand where you are in your world, in your practice. So what is leadership and who is a leader to you, Tad?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this question in terms of some of the best leaders that I've ever worked with. And it's been in a lot of different contexts, sometimes at work, but sometimes I'm also a musician, and sometimes it's been in the context of a musical director or a band leader or people like that as well. And I think some of the things that the best leaders that I've experienced were people that had this ability to sort of recognize the strengths of each individual member and be able to kind of draw those out in a really positive and encouraging way. And then, obviously when needed, they could provide the clarity and the vision for what we were trying to accomplish and get everyone excited and on board with that. But they also weren't obtrusive or overbearing. It wasn't about being sort of a dictator or something like that. It was like almost more the captain of a ship, where they would get votes and input from the other crew members and then try to make educated decisions based on that. So yeah, I think it's someone who is, of course, willing to step up and provide some vision and some clarity, but that also knows when to step back and let others shine and show their best gifts as well.
And I think it's a very tricky topic, right? Because people whom we lead, they're all different and they have different needs in the level of communication and clarity and so on. And we just discussed it last week with some people with whom I'm connected in my network, how management is actually like the same behavior can be seen as micromanagement and as good directive leadership based on who is managed or led. Because
Sure.
some people really need a lot of clarity and just really like step by step how to's.
Mm-hmm.
And if you as a leader know that and you can accommodate for that, you actually bring in the best out of that person, just as you said. But you need to know it, right? And you need to have the insights in the people who you have on your team and be able to adjust to those needs and just as you said, really bring the best out of every person because it's different from each person.
Right, exactly. So, like you were saying, that takes observation and insight, and then that willingness to adjust and be flexible when needed. Yeah. Mhm.
And that can also return to ourselves, towards ourselves, observation and getting those insights, right? Knowing ourselves. And then we can actually transition to the topic for the focus topic for today, right? About the introverts
Mhm.
being in the leadership positions or the entrepreneurship positions. So could we define what an introvert looks like and how an introvert acts and what introvert needs before we start going into how that combines with leadership?
Sure. Yeah. So, of course, with any definition, there's always it's always somewhat broad in general, right? Because there are, one thing I always remind people is that introversion and extroversion exist on a continuous spectrum, and every individual person is unique and is going to fall in a different place on that. But there are some general like commonalities that apply to a lot, if not most, introverts. And some of those things would be a lot of it has to do with how we maintain and restore our energy. And so, people that fall a bit more on the extroverted side of the spectrum uh, draw a lot of their energy from interaction with others. And, they still need some alone recharge time as well, but primarily that's where they get the energy from. And too much alone time can result in actually feeling exhausted and tired and unmotivated. Whereas the opposite tends to be true with those on the introverted side of the spectrum. We tend to draw more of our energy and therefore tend to need a bit more alone time or solitude to recharge and feel at our best, to then be able to come into situations with more people and things like that. And there's
Mm.
also, again, natural tendency towards introspection and reflection, because we tend to be more comfortable with solitude and being alone. That can really lend itself towards deep thought and reflection, deep focus, and even creativity, intuition. A lot of introverts tend to be quite empathic and sensitive towards the feelings and needs of others. Um, and yeah, I would say those are just some of the general markers of what we might call an introvert.
Mhm. That's so cool because actually what you talk about the second and the third, the time for like or the tendency to reflect to have this uh, will to actually go in this introspective mode and also the empathy, those are all the traits that we discuss that are important for leaders, right? So here we already start talking about like, okay, leaders actually introverts can be good leaders because it's more natural for them with those parts that are actually important for all the leaders to nurture within themselves. So
Right.
let's first talk about the kind of some challenges that introverts can have in the leadership positions or when they're entrepreneurs, and even if they don't have a big teams, but they have to be the driving force. They have to wear a lot of hats on them, just because of the nature of entrepreneurship. What kind of challenges do you see from your clients and within your network?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. And definitely, if maybe if people are watching, they can add some of their own experiences too, if there's comments or that sort of thing. But yeah, some of the common challenges I see are with the more outward or front-facing aspects of business, whether that be networking in a traditional sense, and with meeting a lot of people in a relatively short period of time can be quite tiring for a lot of introverts. And, I think sometimes even just sharing outwardly or, some of the things like what we might call self promotion or marketing can feel a bit uncomfortable or foreign to a lot of introverts because, again, we're used to having a rich internal world and a world that's very well illustrated and detailed in our own minds. But when it comes to showing that and sharing that with others and communicating that, that's often not our first tendency. And so doing that in the context of, as you mentioned, like an entrepreneur or leaders too in a business situation it's that can feel uncomfortable and a bit foreign. And so those, and then likewise, sometimes it's sales too. We tend to be, again, sensitive, and ideally sales is a collaborative conversation, a process of trying to help someone, right, arrive at a solution that you can help them with. But for those that haven't been doing that or are new to that, for a lot of introverts, that can inside they can feel this or have this thought that I am being too pushy, or I'm bothering this person, or that type of thing. And a lot of times the challenges for my clients and people that I talk to are those internal pressures that we can put on ourselves sometimes about, you know, what if people don't agree with what I'm saying? What if I'm being too much? What if, you know, all of those
Mhm.
sorts of questions. And so some of the challenges can come from the inside as well, in the way that we're thinking about and interpreting things.
And again, I think that taps back into the introverts are more mm, natural, or it comes more naturally to them to reflect and to really look inwards. So that's why those questions come up. Whereas a more extroverted person just maybe goes ahead and just tries more things, and or tries to repeat the same thing and see how the effects are. I'm not saying that one is wrong and one is right. It's more about the different approaches, right, and different ways of learning. So yeah, it really goes into like the introverted person is more of a sitting and thinking and reflecting after each iteration or each interaction,
Mm-hmm.
and then trying to take some learnings from that. And what I hear from you, Tad, is that the danger is that sometimes we kind of draw some conclusions and generalize things and start overthinking and then withdraw ourselves back because of those conclusions instead
Yeah,
of trying a bit more.
exactly. Yeah, I think that that can definitely be a challenge. And yeah, so that's one of those ones that tends to be kind of a hidden challenge sometimes, unless you've really cultivated some awareness around it, because yeah, a lot of times that happens in our own mindset, or again, it happens internally. And because each of us lives with ourselves 24/7, we tend to take for granted the things that go on and the thoughts that we're having, without so often, taking a step outside of ourselves to kind of re-examine how we're thinking about things. And that can be important. But yeah, like you were saying, those I think every strength can have its kind of its shadow that can be a liability sometimes too, and that applies for introverts or extroverts, or regardless where anyone is on that spectrum. So it's kind of learning to, okay, how can I make the most of those strengths while also uh, recognizing what the liabilities might be, and how I can adjust for those, and continue honing that.
Mm. And you're helping with that, right, Tad, nowadays. And actually, I would like to roll back a bit, apart, like before you started working with entrepreneurs, and niche down into focusing on that um, part of the population. You have been counseling or coaching and mentoring for over a decade now. So you have been working with people face to face in quite an intense work. I could imagine that people come to you with their struggles. It's not like people come into mentoring coaching quite often when everything is shiny and bright in their lives, unfortunately. So for you yourself as an introvert, how did you handle that? How did you keep your practice sustainable for yourself so that you could show up to for your clients in a good way, but also not damage yourself for your personal relationships?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So it definitely took time, and it was a learning process for me for a long time, um, especially early on when I was working in environments where, for early in my career, I was working in inpatient environments, and environments where there was a lot of people around. And so, it was again having to develop this self-awareness, to recognize uh, some of those warning signs when I was starting to, when that battery was starting to get low,
Mm.
and I was starting to feel more drained, and it was, you know, developing support networks around that with supervisors and colleagues, it was also, you know, learning to really prioritize my life outside of work as well, and prioritize my self-care to make sure that I had a rich and rewarding life in addition to and outside of my work, and with, you know, habits and activities and things that really did recharge and nourish me. Um, so, you know, again, music was one of those big things for me, but it was also making time to read and absorb information. It was making time for like gardening or hiking or spending time in nature. It was, you know, making time for spending time with like close family or a couple of close friends or loved ones. Um, and, you know, I've had a daily meditation and prayer practice for a long time now, and that's helped quite a lot as well. So yeah, it was over time. I just kind of developed some different strategies for getting myself centered and for the most part doing my best to maintain um, a certain level of grounding, so that when it did come time to really be fully present with my clients and people that I was helping, that I could really do that and really give in that way and practice that empathy and be fully engaged with them. But yeah, it took, you know, like I said, to kind of developing some things outside of the work to then show up and be able to do that.
And I love your answer, Tad, because it covers several very important points that I always try to really bring across. First of all, you said you developed the system to like the self-awareness and the system to realize when your battery starts running low. Can you tell us a bit about the symptoms or kind of the signals that you have been, or maybe you're still, I guess, looking out on, and to see like, oh, okay, I haven't been nurturing myself enough. Time to take some extra time off and be alone, go into the garden, play some music, whatever.
Yeah, definitely. There were so some of the kind of early red flags for me were if I was starting to become more irritable,
Mm.
whether at work or not at work. So increased kind of irritability or even agitation at times. Um, Feeling distracted or unfocused was a sign
Mhm.
that I was starting to get a bit drained or overloaded. You know, having difficulty kind of keeping my thoughts straight, or having difficulty being present. You know, if I would find myself getting lost in thoughts, that was a sign. Um, and then sometimes it was even just physical too, right? It was a feeling of physical tiredness and fatigue that could set in at times as well. And at the worst, it would be getting sick. You know, that was always
Mm.
like when I realized I had been uh, maybe burning too hot for too long. Then I would get sick at the end of a really stressful um, period. And
Mm.
so yeah, it was really a lot of um, physical, mental, and emotional kind of symptoms that I could recognize that, okay, this isn't usually me at my best. You know, like I mentioned, either tired or irritable or distracted or even physically feeling really um, fatigued or having strange aches and pains, even getting colds, getting sick, things like that.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that. But here is the caveat. When you're in those moments, it usually means that you have some prerequisites, like there is some more intensity in your work, there is something going on, right? That's why you're pushing harder, you're not really recharging on time. When you catch yourself on those red flags, what were your strategies to say, okay, Tad, you need to slow down, you need to pause? Because I see quite often those ambitious entrepreneurs who are like, yeah, but I just need to finish this project. Yeah, but I just need to kind of get land this client. Yes, but, and then, and then you burn out.
Right.
So how do we catch it on time, and how do we make ourselves to really slow down?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I can just kind of speak from personal experience, but I think this will be applicable and hopefully helpful advice for others listening too. Um, but recognizing that after a certain point, working more and working harder is not always better, right? That I think in a lot of ways, especially in Western culture, we've sort of been taught this sort of industriousness that the harder you work and the more you work, the more your results. And I've come to kind of learn that yes, there are times when hard work is what's called for, is what's appropriate and can be helpful, but not always. And if we run on that as our default program, then that's when, like you were saying, that you can easily head towards burnout. And so I think reminding myself, number one, that, um, you know, especially when you start to notice some of those red flags, continuing to push and continuing to press may not always be the best thing. And in many cases may actually lead to diminishing results, less quality in my work, actually losing a client or something, forgetting, to follow up on something important. The things that dropping the ball on things that could actually even be harmful in your business, right? And so recognizing that, then it's about taking that next step to say, okay, I need to treat um, my whatever you might call it, self-care or recharge or just your life outside of work, treat that as much of a priority as the time that I'm spending in my work, recognizing that they both support each other, and that the more that I can show up refreshed, energized, centered, calm, clear, the better my work is going to be, the better work I'm going to do, the better results I'm going to get, the better results my clients are going to get, the better the quality is going to be. And so when you can remember that then it's really about, it becomes a little bit easier to take a day off if you need, or even sometimes it's just taking an afternoon nap, or taking a little bit of time off to know when it's time to close the laptop or turn off the phone or um, whatever that might look like for you. Then it becomes a little bit easier to do that because you recognize that, hey, ultimately it's not just helping me feel better. It's going to help me perform better in my work as well.
And I can just sign under that. From my own experience, it's not easy sometimes.
Yeah.
Owning your own business, like running, trying to build it from scratch while having a toddler at home, and you just try to, like, I try to squeeze all the work in the time when she's not around, so that I do get quality time with her. It's getting, like, it's easy to push myself a bit further, like, I need to do this as well, or I want. This is also the problem with a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, that I have in common with them, that we build our business on our passion. So it's fun to work on our business.
Yeah.
But that's the danger. That's really the danger. And for me, having the people who are pushing me into self-care has been a big help. My business mentor, the first time I've heard her as a guest on a podcast, she said about that. And I'm not quoting now word by word, but actually even written it down somewhere in my notes, that self-care, like my investing in myself, is the number one strategy for me growing my business.
Yeah.
And she's frantic about that. 8 hours sleep, 3 times per week, training with a personal trainer, and proper food, and so on and so forth. So all those things are the foundation for her to keep growing her business in a sustainable way. And that resonated with me, and that's why that was one of the parts, or one of the reasons why I signed up for her program, because she's attracting people like that.
Yes.
And it's really important to have people around you who actually see the value in self-care, see the value in the balance in life. I'm not talking about work-life balance, but really that you're not really relying on one area of your life completely and identify yourself with that area only, but have yourself, or like your toes, into different kind of pots, or fingers in different pots, or toes in the different ponds. And that is going a bit into what the second thing that you said about how you are working on recharging yourself. You said that you like surrounded yourself with a support system. You developed that with the colleagues, with the peers, with the supervisors back at work. And I think it's important to emphasize that. Just because it's self-care or whatever you call it, me time, it doesn't mean that you have to be alone with that part.
Right.
It's
Right. No,
super important to tap into the community, to tap into the people around you who see you, who care for you, who worry about you. Lean on to that.
definitely. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that, again, is easy to overlook and forget that, a lot of um, entrepreneurs and especially like solopreneurs and things can forget that, it doesn't, just because you're working for yourself or you're working on your own venture doesn't mean that you have to do it by yourself. And in fact, you probably shouldn't. You probably should have, like in your case, that was a perfect example, like having a mentor or a program that you're with, like, and I'm sure, probably people in your personal life too. It's like, you should have a network still of people that are close to what you're doing, that know you, that can help you when you need it, and that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can get feedback or support from. Um, yeah, really important not to try to go it alone.
And also the support network you can use to actually fulfill your needs as an introvert. Going back to that part of our conversation, you might need more alone time,
Mhm.
which means that maybe you need to ask for help, someone offloading you at home or in your business so that you have that time to recharge your batteries, to sit in silence, to not have lots of things to do at the moment, and just have 1 hour of sitting and being
Yeah,
or
that's a really
getting
good
into
point.
that retrospective.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. Is sometimes the support is asking for, like you said, someone to take something for you for a moment, so that you, because that alone time is important for you, or that you need that. Um, yeah, and I think a lot of people maybe feel sometimes reluctant to ask for that, or maybe they have a kind of a flawed belief that that's somehow bad or selfish. And really, it's not a matter. I try to tell people it's not a matter of placing a value judgment on it, or it being a character thing. It's not selfish, really. It's a matter of, hey, what do you need to be healthy? What do you need to function at your best? And in this case, if we're talking about entrepreneurs or leaders, what do you need to be able to do your job the best you can?
So, what would be the low hanging fruits that you usually maybe start with your clients in your network? How do you help those introverted entrepreneurs shine brightly in a sustainable for them way?
Yeah, so I really like to take a strengths based approach in a lot of ways. So I like to have conversations with people about, well, first off, kind of like you mentioned earlier, why are you doing this? What do you love to do? What are you passionate about? What made you um, want to go in this direction, and what's your vision, and why? Because connecting with that internal compass, that internal motivation, I think is a really helpful and important piece for, as part of that foundation, but also to know, to have your direction and your motivation. Uh, but yeah, then I like to just kind of get to know them and understand, uh, what are your strengths, and likewise, what are the struggles, because we've all got both, right? And sometimes people, we tend to see our flaws or our struggles, kind of loom large, and it can be very easy to overlook or downplay uh, some of our strengths that we might just take for granted, things that, either knowledge that we have, or experience that we have, wisdom that we have, just, or even just innate qualities, um, that, again, because you're living with yourself 24/7, it's easy to just forget about those things and assume that that's no big deal, when in fact that might be something that someone else needs to, that you could help them with, or they need to learn from you, or likewise that could be leveraged in your business. And thinking creatively or in connecting with people or that sort of thing. So, getting clear on the strengths, and then, like I said, that intrinsic motivation and vision, that can really help kind of build the excitement and the energy and the motivation that's needed um, to get things started um, and feel good about the work ahead.
Mm. So it sounds like you are doing that work with your clients in the conversation.
Yeah. A lot of times it comes through conversations, and that could be it. Sometimes it's one-on-one things like this. Sometimes it might be a group conversation, or sometimes it might be even just in chats or in messengers or
Hmm.
in comment threads and things like that too, or in asking questions. It's one of the things I try to do is ask good questions. Knowing that if someone asks me for advice, I could always give my thoughts or my advice, but it may or may not be applicable to them. It may or may not resonate with them or be the best solution for them. Um, so sometimes I'll ask more questions just to get
Mm.
more clarity, and a lot of times the answers for people come out of that dialogue.
Yeah, yeah, that's the best gift that we can give to our clients, right? The perspective and the space to explore, and the support to explore. Because
Yeah.
sometimes we just get stuck in when we try to explore it ourselves, uh, and it's just hard. And as one of my guests here on the show, Chavathos, said at some point, our brain is like a Google. Whatever you ask it, you'll find the answer. The
Mm-hmm.
trick is to ask better questions to get better answers. And that's where an external person can actually help. Start asking you different kind of questions so that you start picking up different kind of answers within your brain. And that's the power of conversations like what you're creating with your clients, Ted.
Thank you. Yeah. I think you're right, and it's definitely been the case too for me when I've had my own uh, coaches or therapists or mentors. Um, them taking me through that kind of a process has helped me get more clarity too, and so I've seen that kind of how that works on the other side of that as well, to be the client, and how helpful that can be.
Mm, for sure. So, what kind of questions could people ask themselves if they want to start exploring? And also, what are the most typical questions, and maybe what are kind of atypical questions that we can start getting off track or on the new track with our inner Google?
Yeah, sure. So do you mean kind of to start that process of like personal exploration, or?
Yes, exactly. Finding your strength, identifying like your or getting clear on your purpose, those kind of things.
Yeah, definitely. So things like, what are the you know what are the times when you feel most yourself? That is a good one, to think about.
Mm.
um, what are the times when when you don't have to think about it? What are the things that you're doing when it feels natural? Or tell me about a time when you were so into what you were doing that you lost track of time. That can be a really good indicator of a gift or a passion or something like that, because those tend to be the things that we get naturally drawn to. Um, yeah, and often I'll just, especially if I'm just getting to know someone, just, ask about, well, why are you here? Tell me what are you working on? What are you looking to do? Um, and even that can just open up a good conversation about um, where they're at now, what got you here, what are you aiming to do, and then let's talk about the gap in between, like what would have to happen, what might have to change between now and where you see yourself. um, and then that can be a really good place to um, start getting some more ideas too about changes that could be made, or adjustments, or things to learn or grow or focus on. So
Mm. Yeah, for sure. There is such a power in really getting that clear, because quite often we think we actually know those answers, that
Mm,
where we are, where we want to go, and how we get there. But when we start trying to explain it to someone, it's like with math, like back in school, like you thought you understood something, but then you try to understand it, like to explain it to your classmate, and you get stuck. And you're like, maybe I didn't understand it really. I need to go back to the textbook. And that's the same with our goals and our situation and our feelings. We think we understand it, but when we try to put the words in that, whether in written for ourselves while journaling or meditating, or when in a conversation with someone, then we start seeing those gaps for real. And this is really the power. It's not to really say that you're stupid and you were lying to yourself. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about really getting empowered, getting this clarity, and seeing what you've been missing.
yes,
Because this is where you get the power of change in your situation. This is where you get the power of actually getting to your goals,
right.
to finding those micro steps that can actually bring you there. So it's just really important to get through those exercises, banal as they sound. You might have heard about them 100 times, but how many times have you sat down and actually done them from
Exactly.
A to Z? So this is a bit of calling out here going on, but I really want to like drive it home because it's super important to not only listen to those things and not only read and swallow those self-help books, but actually do the things that we're talking about, do the
Yes,
things that those books are covering, because that's where the power and transformation is lying. Not in you getting this information, but in you applying it and actually finding out what does it mean in your life.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's where it really um, takes on its own life. Information just by itself is inert, right? But information with insight and with empowered action, that's when things change. Like you said, when things happen. And
Mm.
yeah, it can be easy to kind of fall back into that more passive mode of just taking in information and learning, which is great. But if we're not doing something with that knowledge or putting it into play, um, then potentially there might not be much movement or change there. And likewise, you try stuff out and find what doesn't work for you or what doesn't resonate and find what does. And what works for one person may not work for another. So, but that's, like you were saying, you don't know until you try things and try some new habits, try some new actions. And then that's when you not only, again, open up new opportunities or new results potentially, but kind of figure out what works for you and what doesn't. So there's a whole menu of different things out there, especially like you mentioned with self-help resources and things, which I love. But yeah, obviously there's no one size fits all approach. So
It's really about experimenting.
mhm.
And to motivate people a bit extra to go that path and explore themselves, Tad, I wanted to ask you what kind of effects do you see from your work with your clients on their life, on their career, on their health, relationships, whatever pops up? What do they actually come to you and say, "Wow, Tad, I had no idea."
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. So a few things come to mind. Clarity. My clients tend to get more clarity on um, themselves, like we talked about, knowing themselves a little bit in deeper ways, but also on their more clarity on their situation, what's working or what's not working, um, what they want, and then they also feel more empowered. A lot of times
Mm.
where uh, when we might first start working together, a lot of times my clients might feel really stuck or just unable to move forward or move past something. And by the time we're kind of finishing our work together, they're usually um, cruising. They're it's like eventually we get to a point where they don't really need me anymore. Like
Mm.
they've got the tools, they've got the energy, they've got more confidence as well. So it's sort of that again. I guess I would say empowerment, that that internal sense that, hey, I'm the one that can drive my own destiny, so to speak, that can um, pilot my own ship, that I'm in control of it, and having the confidence and the tools to be able to do that.
I can so relate to that, and that's why I'm smiling so widely now. When my clients come to me and they talk about the situation and how they went through that situation without my help, how they transferred the knowledge from one situation that we discussed or one scenario to something quite different, but they managed to apply that knowledge and really live through it. I just feel like a proud mama every single time. It just
Mm-hmm.
warms up my heart to see those transformations and see, like, yes, we've done a good job here together. You got it. You really got this idea because you could like apply it in a different situation. And it's just the most rewarding part of this job, really.
It really is. Yeah, I'm glad you shared that, and that's so cool because I can completely relate to what you just said. That's like why one of the things I love most is those moments, where you just see the light come on, or they express something that, wow, I never thought about it that way before, or again, like I have another conversation, or we check in and they're like they've made huge strides, taking actions they've never done before, or whatever. Um, and yeah, it's so rewarding and so cool to see that process happen.
Ted, I would like to wrap up with the three questions that I usually ask. One of them is simple. If people want to learn more about what you do, maybe join some of your program or work with you one to one, what's the best ways to find you and reach out to you?
Yeah, so right now the best way would probably be on Facebook. That's where I'm most active. So they can, of course, just friend me or message me directly on there, but they can also join my free community, which is called Empowered Introvert Entrepreneurs. So there's a link to that right on my page, and it's a free group. So that would be a great place to connect with me. But they can also go to tadlusk.com, my website, and there's easy ways to reach out to me through there as well.
Great. We'll put those in the show notes for the podcast that people can just easily click and reach out to you.
Thank you.
Ted, if you would give three great pieces of advice to our viewers and listeners, whether it is about the personal development, their business and entrepreneurship, anything, what those tips would be?
Yeah, I would say first, know thyself. To
Mm,
um, it's never a frivolous thing. It's never time wasted to invest time in introspection, getting to know yourself on a deeper level, in whatever methods you do that through, whether it's through counseling or coaching, or through meditation, or your own spiritual practice, or whatever that might be. But um, really get to know yourself inside and out, and that's an ongoing process, of course, as we all know, right? But that is some of the best, I think, time and energy that you can invest.
mm,
um, and then likewise, like maybe just take inventory of your strengths, take inventory of, be honest with yourself, and even maybe just writing out, things that qualities that you have, that you can bring, that you can share with other people, um, and you know along those lines, you can write down like things that, kind of like we talked about earlier. What are you frustrated about? What's not working for you in your life right now? What would you really like to change, and what would your ideal scenario look like? This again, start that kind of process of really reflecting on, am I living as intentionally as I could be, and what changes could I make possibly? And then finally, I guess the third tip I might just say is just invest in yourself.
mm,
And again, there are lots of ways to invest in yourself. Obviously, you can do that financially through, like you mentioned, programs or coaching or things like that. Is hugely helpful, and is going to help move you forward much much quicker. But likewise, that you can invest, like we mentioned, time and energy into um, learning the new skill that you've been kind of thinking about and putting off, or you know um, investing in your own just personal growth and development. I think is one of the best things that you can
mm.
do, and it's gonna it's going to show up in how you deal with other people as a leader, as we've talked about. It's going to show up in the quality of work that you do, but also just the quality of presence that you bring to your interactions with people, and guarantee that'll pay dividends down the road. So
Mm. I love those, Tad. And actually, they aligned with what I usually give as tips if I'm asked that as a guest on the shows. I usually say invest your time and energy and resources into learning yourself, because this is just the best gift you can give to your partner, your team, and anyone surrounding, so who, like anyone around you. When you know yourself, you react in better ways. You are more proactive. You are getting it out of this firefighter mode, and that's just beneficial to everyone. So it's not a selfish thing, or it's a selfish thing, but it's in a very healthy way. Selfish.
yeah,
So I love
exactly.
your tips. Thank you so much for sharing them, Ted.
Absolutely, yeah. And just to kind of wrap up on what you just said, that's one of the things that always seems to happen too with clients when when they've made really good changes is they talk about how their spouse or their family members or their friends or whomever notice the changes in them, and their relationships improve. And like you said, by investing in our own development, it helps improve all those other areas of life too. In addition to leadership, entrepreneurship, work, it'll help you improve your relationships and how you show up for the people in your life too.
Yeah. If we would try to wrap up with one practical piece of advice that our viewers or listeners can implement already today after listening and watching, what would that be?
Hmm, that's a great question. I want to give that some thought and give a good answer. Well, yeah, I guess I would say, and this kind of ties into the tips that we went over, but you know, go ahead and take some sort of action step, and it could be in an uncomfortable direction, and usually when we do uh, start to work on or try to learn or just open new doors, right? It's chances are it's going to feel a bit uncomfortable because it's going to be some new territory for you, but that's really where the growth happens. So I would just say, if you took something from this conversation, this interview today, just see if how you can put that into action, even if it's a small action step. Maybe it's reaching out to a uh, support person. Maybe it's planning a new uh, training for your employees. Maybe it's connecting with a coach or something like that. But even if it's a small action, something that maybe there's something you know about that you've been kind of putting off or avoiding or delaying, but see if you can, and just take one piece from this conversation today and ask yourself, how can I put that into action and get things moving?
I love it, Ted. And it can be as simple as, okay, where can I create some time for myself? Because I'm not
Yes.
having enough of that as an introvert, and I'm really draining my battery. So look at your calendar and put it in there. Some time, 15 minutes, but 3 days in a row, or 15 minutes of just sitting and being
Yes.
and feeling fine with that. Just really commit to feeling fine about that.
Yes. Thanks for that. Yeah, exactly. And that itself would be a great action step. So yeah, just, and sometimes the action is slowing down, right? Or making, as you said, making time um, for that alone time if you need it, or the self care if you need it. Um, yeah, that's great.
Tad, thank you so much for the conversation. I got a lot of very valuable reminders for myself how I need to take care of myself. That's always the beauty of these conversations. I'm not here as a guru knowing it all. I'm also human, and I want to be open about that. So I really appreciate your time and your sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And same here. I totally enjoyed the conversation, and it's really helpful for me too to hear your input, and likewise talking about these things just helps solidify things for me. And as you said, always working on growing and improving myself. So really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, Tad. And yeah, we're learning together, and that's what I hope that your viewers and listeners are also doing with us. You're getting some insights, you're getting some reminders, and you are getting this extra kick in the pants to take action. Really do it. After every episode, I really want you to take some small action. That those are the tiny changes, those 1 degree adjustments that you do in your life that actually create a big change and big transformation in the long run. So think about what you take with you and how you can implement it today. And let's talk next week. Thank you, everyone. Bye.